Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. Believe it or not, I am a better teacher now, post-COVID, than I was before the onset of the pandemic. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those who don't know, we have a very brief 60 minutes, so I'm going to kick us off, and I'm going to do it quite quickly. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Tara Graham, and I head up our educator community at Course Hero. For those who aren't familiar with Course Hero, we are an online learning library of course-specific resources, more than 40 million at this point, of resources that have been contributed by our community of college students, as well as nearly 50,000 verified college instructors. And for those educators in the room, for those of you who are not familiar with Course Hero, we encourage you to come join the platform today and during this time of COVID. If you get verified as an educator, you get some free access to the library. So you can go see what's in there. Instructors are finding it really helpful to go see how other instructors are transitioning their courses online, what resources they're using, and also using these resources for the development of future courses. Now, one of the contributors in our library and a contributor in our community at large is Dr. Kelly Richmond Pope. She is the reason we are here today. She's also a fan favorite on our events stage. Dr. Pope is an associate professor of accounting at DePaul University in Chicago. She has been teaching for more than 20 years, and it's not just face-to-face classroom time. She's been teaching online. And today she's going to touch on the evolution of that online course delivery, and particularly the accelerated evolution since the onset of COVID. Somehow she manages to not just do the instructing and be there for her students, and you're going to hear how she goes above and beyond in many ways, but she finds the time to also be an award-winning filmmaker, an entrepreneur in the education space, a very popular TED speaker, and she manages to answer emails pretty much within the hour. You're going to hear her say that she has a 2-hour rule for answering emails, and she'll talk about how she does that. But within the Course Hero team, we know that if we send her an email, we'll probably get an answer within the hour. We are very lucky to consider her a friend and a close collaborator on many of our initiatives. And today, she is going to present, she has this very provocative assertion that she is a better teacher now since the onset of COVID during this time of pandemic and social distancing and Zoom classrooms. It's a little bit of a curious assertion. So the way we're going to work this is we're going to give her 35 minutes. She's going to unpack some of her thinking here and also share some of the techniques she's developed in a very short amount of time to try to bridge the gap between her and her students and create a sense of community. And then during that time, we encourage you to make use of that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, because we are going to carve out about 15 minutes at the end of the session. I'll hop back in, and for those questions that have been asked and upvoted, I will be a facilitator of those questions. We're going to try to make this as interactive and participatory as possible. We also have the chat box available, so feel free to connect with each other throughout this session. We will drop some helpful links along the way so you can access more resources that have been shared by Dr. Pope, resources in the Course Hero library, of course, and ways we can continue the discussion moving forward. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Kelly Richmond Pope, and I'll circle back at the end of the session. Take it away.
Thanks, Tara. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everyone, and hopefully that will be a success. Have you ever done a presentation where you thought you were sharing it and it didn't share and you just kept going? So can everyone see? Anyone thumbs up or voice, you can see it?
We're good to go, Kelly.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So as Tara said, this is the upside of teaching during a pandemic. And I want to start by saying that I recognize the seriousness and the severity of COVID-19 and do recognize that there are struggling families, colleagues who are dealing with the issues of family members impacted by this terrible pandemic. So I do not want to make light of that. And I want to recognize that we do understand, and I'm very thoughtful of that. So this is focused on teaching and the upside of what I've learned about myself during these crazy times. So I'm gonna go ahead and start moving. So you learned a little bit about me. I'm an associate professor in Chicago at DePaul University, co-founder of an amazing ed tech company called Red Flag Media. I'm a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and the name of my documentary is All the Queen's Horses. And if you look in the chat, you'll see a YouTube link to it if you are looking for a great movie to watch this weekend. TED speaker, and I started teaching in didn't tell you the year. Oh, it's up there. I thought I took it out. Sorry. So I started teaching in 1997. I teach undergraduate, graduate, executives, and I started really my PhD program, and a lot has changed since I started teaching. But I've done both face-to-face and online. And so it's a little bit about me, but I want to show you something. I've been in the classroom since age 3. That little girl that you see there, that is me with my father. So I'm a second generation college professor. My dad was a business school professor as well. And so I have been in the learning game my entire life. My mother was a guidance school counselor. My dad was a professor. So I grew up on the college campus, and my weekends were spent drawing on the chalkboard and playing teacher. And so now I am one. So I've always loved learning. That's just sort of been in my DNA since day one. But for you all, can you close your eyes and think back to when everything changed for you? My day was March 11th, 2020. And this was the last time I was in class with my students. And so who you see speaking there is Jason Medillo. At the time, he was the acting U.S. Marshal for the Northern Illinois District. And so he's a participant in my documentary. So we had watched the film, and he was supposed to be sharing insight about the Rita Crumwell case. But while he was talking, about every 45 seconds, his phone would ring. And it would be all about the pandemic. And so the students were just sort of sitting there, you know, eyes just, you know, open, because what are we going to do? And so I was nervous, but I felt like I was prepared. Okay. Was I ready? Did you feel ready? I felt like I was ready. I felt like I was ready. About as ready as when I went skydiving. And jumping out of an airplane at 16,000 feet and falling through clouds. As ready as you do when you do something like that. In that picture, I was much younger, so I probably wouldn't do that again. But this is why I thought I was ready. Okay, I had a game plan. I had my PowerPoint slides, you know, from the book publisher. They were loaded into D2L, our learning management system. Several quizzes were already available online, auto grade, check, got that done. I responded to emails typically within 2 hours, so I was pretty quick on it. I had really great communications with my students, so if they needed something, they would talk. We would, we had a good rapport. I had completed an online training program that DePaul offers about 6 years ago, and so I remembered some of those tools. And then, just by chance, I had a similar course that I had taught that had been recorded. So I had these 3-hour lectures of live teaching from a course. So I was like, you know what? If we have to go online at the drop of a dime, I'll be fine, because I have all of these things already done. Now, here's the issue. It was me against the learning experience. And if you go back to that slide, everything is really focused on me. I thought I was ready because I had done all of these things. You don't hear me really talking about the learning experience. And I really needed to think about that. And here was the issue. The face-to-face instruction became my crutch. Because I knew we were always coming to class, I didn't really think about my online presence. Everybody came to class. We had a good time when we would get together. I had a 97% class attendance. Most questions or concerns were resolved in the classroom. So if I posted something that didn't have a good description on D2L, they would ask in class. I completely neglected my online class presence. And the pandemic really showed me that, because the face-to-face instruction became my crutch. So I want to show you a little bit. Now, I don't do this anymore, but this is a screenshot from my learning management system. And if you look on the left side, you see where it says A, and it says IPPT chapter 004. And then if you go to the right side, it says LLHNECH03 solutions manual final. What I would do, guys, is I would take what the book publisher gave me, not just throw it up online. they could figure it out. It says 4, maybe it's chapter 4. You know, if they had a question, they'd ask me in class. And that was really what my focus was. Now, I teach at DePaul, as I said, and so I am always engaged in my research. So, you know, I teach, but I'm also evaluated on publishing. So I'm focused on my research, I'm focused on my teaching, but the online aspect was a little bit different. And so COVID made me realize how unclear I actually was and how neglectful I actually was in my teaching approach. So this is what I did, and this is what I learned. I put the online learning experience first. Engagement became the focus of the experience. And so a couple things that I realized that I wasn't doing that I now feel like I'm much stronger at is I have clear instructions, short videos, no longer than 15 minutes. Now, I got that from using the TED model. And so when I was practicing for my TED Talk, one of the things that TED really emphasizes is 18 minutes or under. And you should be able to convey an idea in 18 minutes. And that's about as long as people will really give you. So I use that model to really redesign those short video lectures. Now, I thought I was doing something great. Remember my open, I said I had these 3-hour videos, 3-hour live courses recorded. Now, I don't know about you guys. How many of you have watched a 3-hour movie recently and didn't fall asleep? So just imagine how it was just watching a student watching these 3-hour experiences. So I got rid of that. I did these short 15-minute nuggets. Now, if the chapter was a little bit longer, I could have several 15-minute nuggets, but I did that. Now, here's something that I learned, and it made me much stronger because it forced me to learn my students in a way that I never had before. I did these one-to-one 15-minute Zoom meetings. Now, this is extremely time-consuming, but I was committed now I'm committed to having a very high-touch approach to teaching. So I set up these 15-minute Zoom meetings. I created a Google Doc, and students would fill in a time, and they would come, cameras on, and they were so appreciative of the one-on-one time with me. Now, I probably got to know my students better this way than I ever did in class because, you know, I'm at the front of the class and they're sort of just listening to what I'm saying. And as much as I try to engage, this one-on-one time with my students was very different. It was very special. And so that's something that I learned that was very important during this COVID teaching. I established a course Slack channel, and I had never used Slack in my teaching. Now, in my filmmaking world, I have Slack communities there, but I've never brought that into my teaching. And so I did that because it was a very quick way to communicate just quick concepts without texting and without people providing their cell phone number. So what I would do, I would send out an invite for chat for Slack, and then they would join this course chat, Slack channel. And I combined both of my classes. So I typically teach 2 or 3 class sections of the same class. So there's this massive Slack community because typically if there's a question, somebody else has it as well. And so then that 2-hour response time, I brought way down to about 5 minutes because what I realized in the COVID teaching environment, when my students had a question, they were working on the assignment right then and there. So they needed an immediate response. So I wanted them to feel connected like they would in class. Someone raised their hand and asked a question. I wanted it to feel like I was getting to them instantly. And I got to the point where I could predict when the questions were going to come because I did these 15-minute Zoom calls. So I understood people's work schedules. I understood their home life. So it really made me more connected to my students in a very different way. Now, when I say clear instructions, this is something that I did. And I spent some time making some changes to my syllabus. I reorganized it. And I started with my bio and a picture. I wanted it to feel inviting and friendly, as opposed to course name, here what the semester is, here's my office number, here's the textbook, just a bunch of text. I needed to warm it up because just as scared as I was teaching online, I had to remember my students were more scared than that taking an accounting class online. So I reorganized, and then I developed a weekly study plan, because what I also realized for my undergraduate students, they didn't know how to manage their time not coming to a class. And so we were teaching, or have been teaching, in an asynchronous environment. And so asking an 18 or 19-year-old taking 5 or 6 classes to manage their time in an asynchronous learning environment is a big ask. And so what I learned is watching my kids. I have a freshman in high school, and watching the structure that the teachers provided for my freshman in high school was really the same structure that I needed to provide my students. So I gave them a study plan on, this is how you should handle your time for this class. I used short descriptions under each D2L entry, so they would know what it was, but not overwhelm them with too much information. I also commuted my weekend availability every Friday and Saturday, because what I realized was, if students were working full time and managing multiple things, they typically worked on their homework on the weekends. And they often felt very concerned about contacting me on the weekend, whether email, text, Slack, they just wouldn't do it. So what I felt that was important, let me open the door and say, hey, I'm here for you. I'm open all weekend. Let me know what you need. Feel free to reach out. And so what I did a lot is let them know I was here, and they came. So I had to make the initial effort to let them know I was here. I encourage text and Slack communication. I do not mind giving my cell phone number out, and I find that students will text a lot more than they will email, and they will use Slack. So that became a very good way to communicate. Now, I have a 5-sentence email rule. If I have to write more than 5 sentences to a student, I need to pick up the phone and talk to you, or we need to Zoom. So that's been my rule for a really long time, and it probably comes back from my forensic accounting days at KPMG, just sort of watching what you put in writing. So if I have to write more than 5 sentences, we're just gonna have a phone call. So my messages tend to be very concise. And then I would begin each week with a weekly agenda email, so they knew what was coming. Okay, this is midterm week, or we have an amazing speaker coming, or we're gonna play a digital game. I would let them know so they could plan out their week. So clearer instructions was something that I realized that I wasn't doing. And so I can be completely transparent and say, again, the classroom environment, that face-to-face interaction became my crutch. So I didn't need to think about these things, because I knew on Mondays and Wednesdays, you were gonna see me, and I could talk my way through it if there was a problem. But when you're in this digital space and you're learning asynchronously, you can't do that as much. So look at this is my COVID approach, LMS. And if you notice, every week looks the same now. And so I started out this with the recorded lecture, with here are the notes, here are the PowerPoints, here is an outline. And then on the right side, I would, you see the same thing, but what I needed to do is I needed to make sure every week looked the same. And that was another problem. I wasn't even consistent with how that online presence looked. And when I went back and I asked a friend, I need you to audit my class. Tell me, do you understand what I'm trying to say? And so a colleague said, your class sort of seems all over the place, and you really need to spend some time making sure people's educational journey through your class is clear. And it wasn't. And so I'm much better now at that. So engagement is key. And what I realized now that I'm in this online community, this COVID community, this COVID teaching community, is the textbook assignments just did not convey the kind of engagement or a fun learning experience. Now, newsflash for me, my students don't read the textbook. Maybe yours do, and if yours do and you have some keys to that, feel free to drop it in the chat. But when I say read the textbook, I might as well have said go do something else, because they don't read the textbook. So I needed to start using materials that were more innovative, more engaging, that they would actually do. And so this is where a new concept or a new way of teaching came about for me. And so engagement being the focus, I started using an immersive theater approach in my class. And so this is really where Red Flag Mania comes in. And so Red Flag Mania is a digital investigative game that I created with an amazing team and with my co-founder, Ronnie Jackson. It's this immersive investigation. And what's great about it is students are learning and they're having fun at the same time. So it feels very different than the textbook approach. And a couple theories that it talks about, it speaks to the cognitive theory of multimedia learning and the Lambert's principles of digital learning. So it's this immersive experience that they actually did. And I was a little concerned. Will they read? Will they do it? But they did. So what you see on the right-hand side is a picture of the movie poster, because Red Flag Mania is a gaming platform, and within that gaming platform, there is a movie. And so this is the movie. And so when I say immersive theater, what I mean is there's a component or a point where they watch a movie. And if you look to the left and right of the images, what they're doing here in class is they are interrogating and interviewing some of the suspects from this case. So I'm able to talk about various accounting theories, forensic accounting theories, auditing theories, ethics, internal controls, all while we're having a really great time. And I can punch into those textbook concepts. So it really made class so much better. So you might be wondering, how did this story end? So I made all these changes, right? I reorganized. I would send out these weekly schedules. I sent out my availability. I created the Slack channel. I did these Zoom meetings. You know, I was quick on email responses. And so how did it end? You have to wonder. Well, this is one, and I can't believe, hopefully nobody from DePaul is on here. I hope not. I didn't look to see who was here. But teaching evaluations during COVID. So I want you to go to the bottom one. And this is really, I was shocked because this is in the height of the pandemic. So this is right after, that's around the second week or third week of March when I was teaching. And so that's when I started teaching. And so these reviews would have come in right around May. And so this one student says, second sentence, I don't think I've ever talked so much about a course with my friends and family before. And that comment made me feel like focusing on engagement and using some of these new approaches and putting me first as a human and letting my students know that I wanted to connect with them and get to know them really made them feel valued. And so this person loved the class. And so third sentence, I believe everyone going into the work world should take this class. Yes, it's a course on financial accounting. Now, guys, I don't know why people don't like accounting. Some people do, like me. I love it, but not all my students do. But my goal is to change them and to make sure that they do. But all of these things started to work. So this next slide shows you just the comparison between the course average and just my department and my college. And this is during COVID. Now, what I'm doing now and what I've learned during COVID and why I feel like I'm stronger is that the kind of content that I have to create and have to push in my class is very different than what I would say I would do post-COVID. And so I don't rely as much on the textbook. And so I have a new obsession now. My new obsession is, how can I make the new class better than the last? And so what you see on the left-hand side is a post from my LinkedIn account about 3 days ago. And it says, I'm obsessed with creating high quality content for my students. This is a sneak peek of a project that we're doing. This is season 2 of Red Flag Mania. And this one's called When We Heal. The first one was When We Pray. This is When We Heal. And so I posted this, and one of my students said this, that just made me just feel like all of this is worth it. You know, I have a very high touch approach when I'm teaching. And so I devote a lot of time to teaching when I'm teaching. And I feel like that's what my duty is. That's what I owe my students. But Ade posted this message, and it couldn't have just come at a better time. And he says that, let me move my screen so I can read it to you. Go back. I've taken a lot of virtual courses recently at DePaul, and this class is among a few that's exceptional. I like your passion and your approach to making virtual learning captivating, fun, and educational. And that's everything, just everything that I was trying to do. And I think that this came about because of COVID. And so I wrote back, thank you so much for saying that. We do have a good time virtually, and we do. And so it takes thinking creatively and sort of thinking differently in order to achieve those responses. So to sum it up, what I've learned during teaching in this pandemic is the first sentence, and that is always designed for online learning. Always, always, always. It is so much easier to think of designing a course online and then having to go into a classroom than the reverse. And I think what caught most of us off guard is we weren't doing this. At least I wasn't doing this. My face-to-face class was good. You know, I have been teaching so long that I know managerial accounting like the back of my hand. I know what I'm gonna do. I know what the questions are gonna be. And so face-to-face, I was fine. I completely neglected the online learning environment, and I will never do that again. So now I only think about designing my class for online, because if I have to go into the class, that's easy because I can think of an interactive lecture. I can think of things we can do together, but thinking about things to do online is a lot different. So that's the big piece of advice. Second, couple things that I do that's very different than I did before, and that's teaching with empathy. You know, it is not easy when you set due dates, you know, and you have students that come up and say, well, I didn't get my homework done because I went to a party. Sometimes in the past, I used to hear that. It's a whole different ballgame when you have a student say, I didn't get my work done because my grandma is in the hospital and struggling with COVID. And so that is not the time to say, well, I can give you a couple days, but that's it. That's not the time to respond that way. And as I was hearing and looking online with colleagues all across the country, seeing how some faculty and instructors respond to students in the midst of this pandemic was really heartbreaking. So teaching with empathy is just so important. What else I learned and that I am more cognizant of is all content does not translate easily to online learning. And I'll tell you, when I was in that DePaul online learning class where they were teaching us how to teach online 6 years ago, they said that, and I was like, yeah. But that is so true. You know, you can't just throw up slides and a couple videos and walk away. You really have to be more thoughtful about that online class. I learned Microsoft Teams, Slack, I became Zoom proficient, and I became Desire to Learn savvy. Now, I'm not sure about the course management system that everybody uses that's at this presentation right now, but for years, I felt that D2L was pretty tough to learn. And so finally, I just said, you know what, I gotta know all the features. And so I'm dangerous now with D2L. But it was required to know that, again, because you took my crutch away. You took that online, that face-to-face course away from me. So I had to learn these things. And so now I'm pretty good at it. As I've said before, I realized that I neglected my online presence. Never again. And what I needed to do is I needed to ask the question of, what is it like taking my class online? And that's a very important question that I want to encourage everybody to ask. What is it like taking your class online? If you were a student taking a class asynchronously and you never saw your professor, how would that feel to you? And so that's what I really had to think about. And it's why I started doing so many different things. We have guest speakers. I can tell you, we played Red Flag Mania. I just had to think of, what is it like to take a class online? Because I wanted them to feel connected. I wanted them to feel like there was a course community. Now, something else I did, and assessment is a big deal and a lot of questions around it. And what I did is I threw out the test. So I don't do as long of tests as I used to. I use mini quizzes instead of tests. And so where I before had a midterm and a final, now I have 10 question quizzes, which ends up really being more questions that they go over than they ever did with the midterm. If you think about it, when I was teaching an hour and a half twice a week, when we would have a midterm, it might have 10 questions and 3 short answers, maybe, you know, because you always have to make sure they have enough time to work through the test. Now, 10 weekly quizzes, they're going through far more content. So this is actually a better way. Using micro lectures, using the TED approach. Mine are 15 minutes, but 18 minutes or less, that's the best thing because no one can sit through 3 hours. So when I thought I was winning with those 3 hours, I actually wasn't, because I needed to re-record everything. Responsiveness is key. I remember reviewing a couple of syllabi, and it would say, if you send me an email, I'll get back to you within 48 hours. I'm like, 48 hours? I mean, that might be another year in the environment that we're living in now. So I think that being responsive and letting your students know that you were there for them during your teaching time is critical. And then the last thing is, having a ring light sort of makes me cool to my kids. And so when I bought this ring light, they thought I was like, ooh, what's mom doing online? So get a good ring light so you can create some really good content for your classes. And so those are the things that I've learned that I feel like have made me stronger, that have made me a better communicator, a more empathetic teacher, and I'm better for it. So this is what I'm doing right now in my class. And it's my current course FaceTime challenge. And again, I told you we're doing asynchronous learning. And I sent this email out to my class, but I also posted it to my LinkedIn profile. And I said, I miss seeing my students so much that I just offered 2 bonus points for 2-minute FaceTime calls with me. And I said, the joys of asynchronous teaching, but I missed seeing their faces. I missed it too. And so my phone starts ringing, FaceTime, because I don't get a lot of FaceTime calls. And so what I have realized is all of these tools and things that I've learned, they're working for me, but my students were really struggling. And I was really unaware of how much they were struggling, because a lot of my students have decided, because it's asynchronous, they are working full time and then taking 16, 18, 20 hours of courses. Well, if you're working full time and taking a full time load, when are you sleeping or studying? And so this is, I think, where resources like Course Hero become very helpful, because the more information that I load to my Course Hero profile, the more information that's available for them that could sometimes assist them when they can't get to me. And the more options that they have to see and hear from other faculty that may be teaching the same course could be very helpful. So you'll find, if you go to my Course Hero page, you'll find a lot of information that I upload, and hope that it's a resource to anyone else. So the key takeaway, I want to quote a very innovative leader that I have a lot of respect for, that I follow, President Pulsifer, and that is, we need to make sure that we are student obsessed. And I think if we do that, then we are putting the online learning experience first and foremost, and our students will win. So Tara, I'm going to pass the mic back over to you, and let's open this up and start having some Q&A.
Yeah, Kelly, thank you for delivering something actionable as always. For those who joined us later in the hour, hi, my name's Tara. I head up the educator community at Course Hero. And I will say, Kelly, as a former instructor, you did something very brave there by sharing those teaching evaluations.
I know, right? Who does that? That's like private, right? I might as well put my social security card up there next.
Okay, so I want to encourage, if you have questions, please use that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We are going to just go straight to the upvoted questions. Feel free to upvote the questions you would like answered. Now, Melanie cuts straight to it. Speaking of actionable, and says, what strategies do you have for adjuncts who don't have the time or financial support to do all of the wonderful things that you do? What is your #1 tip?
Oh, that's a tough question. This is Melody, that's the name. I mean,
Melanie.
That's a tough question. Because what you're saying is, what do I do if I don't have money and time? I need one of them, Melody. You got to can you give me some time? I need some time. You got to give me something to work with. Because, I mean, think about the question. We have nowhere to go if you don't have any money or time. So let's assume that we can create some time. And I think if you can create some time, depending on your course size, figuring out a way to connect with your students and understanding where their struggle points are would be how I would use my time. Because we have to find the time. Because I would say, and this might be a controversial statement, but I would have to say, if we don't have the time, we have to really make sure that we're in the right season to be teaching, because we have to make the time. We have to find the time, because if you don't have it, then what are we doing? So you got to give me one. So I'm assuming that you're going to give me some time. And if you can give me that, then I would say making those personal connections, because that's the most time consuming, but it gives you the most insight. You know who needs financial aid. You know who's looking for an internship. You know who has an ill parent. You know who has who just had a baby. Like there's all kinds of life that's happening around. And I think it's really important for us to know what our students are going through.
So Melanie is, she says, I get it. Adjuncts aren't compensated for their time, unfortunately. One question I have, and this is potentially, you tell me, a benefit to integrating technology in certain ways into our classroom is technology enables a certain one-to-many capacity. That was the same format for in-person classroom style delivery, but I know, Kelly, I've heard you talk about using Slack to like state your availability when you happen to be available, so students have that understanding and they can make use of it, and the time that you do have, you can like blast it out in real time and reach those students through their mobile devices, and then they can have access to you. And so it's kind of it's a give and take, but the technology is threaded throughout. I think you also had mentioned FaceTime in your presentation, where it's kind of an impromptu, join me in this moment.
Yeah, I might be cooking dinner, but I can talk to you and I can hold the phone and talk. But yeah, I mean, I think they see a different side of you. They see a human side of you, just like you see a human side of them.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and technology enables you to carve out when you do have the time, even if it's not the full hour. I think in another talk I heard you mention, just finished a jog. I'm not in my professorial state, but if you need access to me right now, if you need help, I've got some time, and we can work through that problem right now.
Yeah, you know, Tara, I think what we've done is we have oftentimes created a lot of unnecessary barriers. You know, I need to be dressed a certain way, like you're saying, or I need to be in a certain space. And if you have a question and you're struggling and you need help, typically that person doesn't care about those things. So I find the time. I might be in my car. I might not be able to look at what you're looking at, but if you can describe it to me, I can help you. And so I think what my class realizes that I'm willing to make the commitment. And I think that means a lot to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that we recently hosted, as you know, our education summit, and Dr. Sherry Turkle was one of our speakers. She's a professor at MIT, author of Alone Together. One thing she pointed out that is really necessary, and so she's a tech ethnographer, but she pointed out that now more than ever, there needs to be a mindset shift, and that we've always been so focused on what's the flow of topics and how do we assess student learning, and we do have a student learning outcomes question that we'll get to, but now more than ever, there's a need for almost this transition that we've always been a little scared to make, of treating the classroom as a family. And you touch on empathy. And I think you touch on a lot of ways that you've taken down those boundaries. And again, tech has been a facilitator for connection. And so I have also heard you talk about giving a big digital hug or something to your students. And so the question is about time, or we talked about time and the absence of time, but maybe it's how we use the time.
Right. It's how we use it. Yeah, I think when I think about the way I use my time, the more initial information I have about the class I'm teaching, the more efficient I'm able to use the time, you know? And so like when I'll send out a lot of surveys, like a lot of 3-question surveys on SurveyMonkey, you know, what was the one thing that I said this week that's confusing to you? And the more information that I can collect, and they'll respond, the easier I can say, okay, I'm going to turn on my phone and just record a 5 minutes lesson on double decline and depreciation. Like the more we survey them, it informs us. And I think it helps me use my time better.
Mm-hmm. So that question is from Gloria, saying, I've taught online for about 25 years and used most of the techniques that you describe, as well as others. When we closed and went online in the spring, I was also teaching in a traditional classroom session. The closure came at midterm, so I was about to compare learning outcomes, and the students actually performed better. online without the social distractions. What was your experience?
So DePaul is on, we're on quarters. And so we were at the end of our winter quarter when we shut down. And so we had a week, and then we went fully online. I would say that my students performed better because I was engaged in a different way than I typically was engaged in face-to-face. You know, I sort of looked at my class as I'm in class, but my class sort of is my office hours too, because typically everyone asks their questions during then. But now what I found is I had such a huge high touch approach to the way I was teaching and managing the class. And because I was really worried, I was worried that our enrollment would go down, our students wouldn't come back, so the same issues or concerns that administrators have, we as faculty have too, because enrollment going down impacts us as well, impacts adjuncts, it impacts tenured professors. It's a big family problem. And so I wanted to make sure that I was doing my part to make sure my students were happy and engaged. So I was worried about it. So I think that I was more engaged than ever. And I think I'm more engaged now than ever because, again, the classroom became my crutch. And you took my crutch away. So now I have to think of all these different ways to be checking in with them in a way that I didn't do before. So I think they did do better. When I think about the grade distribution, I didn't have any D's or F's like I had before, but the questions would still be the same. Like they would still be consistent with the same types of questions. So I wasn't concerned that cheating was happening. And, because I do fraud research and ethics research, I'm always talking about you never want to be an unethical cheating accountant. So a cheating accountant. So I always sort of shame them that way to make sure that, you don't want to cheat, because at some point you're going to have to know these things. So I don't think that cheating was ever a big issue because the questions still were the same. So I would say they did better because I was better. And I think a lot comes from just the skills that I acquired and my desire to want to be, student obsessed with my class in a very different way. So I think a lot of it came from me, and their success came because I was better.
Yeah. So, and that is, we're hearing that consistently across our community, that the transition online forced many instructors to realize that the way we've been designing curriculum has been very me-centered. As the educator, here's how I think content should roll out and what engagement should look like. But once you put a screen in between, you automatically become more user, more student learning centered. And all of these questions and complexities started popping up, which are pretty good ones. And so hearing that the learning outcomes seem to be trending in a certain direction, I guess we have to see long term, but we're beginning to hear more of that.
And I think what the pandemic has shown us is, at least for me, I hadn't learned anything new in a long time. I hadn't forced myself to learn a new skill or learn a new technology for a super long time because I didn't need to. Like, if you think about it, if you've been teaching your class for more than 3 years and you've been using the same textbook and the same assignments, that's a problem. We have to be evolving, and there's really no reason, no one's pushing us to, but the pandemic pushed us to. And so that is a reason why I feel like I've gotten stronger, because it forced me to learn new things that I didn't do. I remember before all this, people saying, I'm going to send you a Zoom link. I was like, what is Zoom? What do you want me to click on? Like, I didn't even think about, you want me to click on Zoom? You want me to turn my audio on? Like, what? You want me to change the background? Like, all these concepts, I saw them, but I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. But now, it's part of what you do. I never even thought about using Microsoft Teams. It's been on my laptop for years. I never clicked on it, but now, it's an option, and now I know how to use it. So I'm just better.
So learning outcomes, of course, are connected to some of these issues of accessibility and equity. And what has extended from that discussion is a lot of thinking that online course preparation and delivery should be asynchronous, pre-prepared, so that anyone can access at any time to achieve those learning outcomes. And I think you have some thoughts on this in terms of how you think about developing your courses.
So I will say I am not the biggest fan of asynchronous learning, and I'll tell you why. And I don't know if anyone out there, if this has ever happened to them, but I too have signed up for an online course before that I never completed because no one really made me, no one gave me the structure. And I think that if we're going to do asynchronous right, we have to create some type of learning about how to learn asynchronously. We need to give them a schedule, give them check-ins, because it's hard to self-govern yourself like that. And so the way I teach, I do an asynchronous synchronous model. So I have recorded content, but I also do a live 2-hour each week where I'm online and lecturing and talking. So for the students that need that want that community, that want to feel like digitally we're together, then you have that. But if you want to go and watch the video, you can do that too. And I think I do that for two reasons. One, for that learner that wants live, but two, I know I recorded that content 6 months ago, 4 months ago. And so perhaps I look different. I'm in a different background. It might not feel as current. And so I don't necessarily want to re-record yet, but I know that if I'm doing these lives, I can use the live and record that and someone can watch that and it still feels like it was just yesterday. So it creates more work for sure. It creates far more work, but it's a better experience for the student. And so as you saw in my slide, it's sort of me versus the learning experience, and the learning experience has won. And so the I in this has had to minimize so that I can increase the learning experience for the student. Because what do we ultimately want? If you teach accounting, you ultimately want them to be engaged so they can retain and pass the CPA exam and be gainfully employed either at a firm or start their own business and have a great life. So all of it sort of is a cycle. And so it's sort of my duty. So that's why I go back to the question of if you don't have time and you don't have money or resources, then I think that we're touching on another issue that we're not really speaking of. And that's, should this be what we're doing if we don't have those things?
Mm-hmm. Well, I also heard you, and I haven't heard an educator really articulate this. Maybe that this is happening, but you kind of approach the development of your course as a product manager, and that as you're trying to figure out how do I approach this week over week, how do I provide the students with what they need, and at the same time carve out the time and opportunity for that live connection, the asynchronous blended with the synchronous, because you are using a hybrid model. Mm-hmm. You actually lay out, you give the students a user manual of here's if you want to perform optimally, and we're back to that question of learning outcomes. Here are some tools that I provided to you, and here's the order and the sequence in which to use those tools. And I think that's a really, it feels a bit, some might think, do we need to tell the students that? Can't they figure it out? But in this environment, do any of us know?
No, right. So for me, it's midterm week. And so, a couple of students sent me an email, are you going to give us a review sheet? And I said, do you need one? They were like, well, yeah, we would like you to tell us how to approach studying for the material that you're going to test us on. And so the question really to me wasn't about, tell me what I need to know for the test, is tell me how to prepare for the way you will ask us. Mm-hmm. And so what I provide weekly is almost like you said, a user manual for how to approach the week. And every week is different. So when we're doing the contribution margin income statement, that's a very different week than when we're doing process costing. And so I feel like you have to guide them, because this is still school. So we can't expect them to come to the table knowing it. This is where they're supposed to learn it. this is where we're creating a safe space so they can make mistakes. And not they don't come in knowing this. So you have to give them something for them to chew on and grow. Give them a seed, it'll grow. And sometimes it might grow in somebody else's class and not yours. And so we have to think of our community of, well, I saw them in the first accounting class, but maybe Professor Mason is going to see that person in the third sequence of this. And that's where the seed starts to sprout. It may not be in my class, but I think it's my duty to help them along that learning journey.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned safe space, and Sam asks, have you found students opening up more about their own struggles and challenges since the pandemic began?
That's a really great question. And I have. And so towards the end, when I was talking about this FaceTime challenge that I'm doing, what I have noticed from the students that I've spoken to thus far, and then this just started a day and a half ago, is the use of the word struggle. I've never heard students say to me, I'm struggling. And when you hear that, you really go into like mama bear mode. I'm a mom, I have 2 kids and a dog. And so when I hear I'm struggling, I need help, I'm just like, oh my God, what is it that I need to do to help them? And so I have heard that more. And what they're struggling about seems to be more family issues. One student thinking about, well, I have a couple of, my mother and my father both got laid off. I don't know if I'm going to continue at DePaul because I have to pay rent, and I could go home and go to the community college and live at home. And so what do you think I should do? And so I've become more of a life coach in a way than I have ever imagined before, because I do think that we had a nice barrier in the classroom. Like, they're just listening to you, whatever you share. But in this environment, I think people's struggles are different, and they need someone to talk to. And so I've heard a lot. I mean, it's different than it was before. The conversation before was, I'm trying to get an internship. Can you look at my resume? Versus, I don't know if I'm going to stay in school, or I have a sick family member. So the conversations have changed, which is why it's our responsibility to teach with empathy, because our roles have changed. And sort of like you said, Tara, we're sort of like family now. And I'll tell you, my first cohort during the shutdown was an MBA cohort that all the students were employees at United Airlines. And so they're students going through all of the problems that the airline industry is going through. And so to know the pain that they were going through while they were taking classes, I mean, I needed to remember that always and try to offer advice. If you want me to forge a resume to somebody, like if you need help, please let me know. We had leaders that came to class. You want me to connect you with the CEO of someplace? Like, you have to think, you have to teach with empathy in a way that we just didn't really have to do before. You know why? Because the Career Center did it. Now I've become the guidance school counselor, the Career Center, sometimes the mother, sometimes the aunt, and the professor, all in a day. And that can be a lot.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Irene asks, with that in mind, how can you do all of that while also setting boundaries and taking care of yourself?
Boundaries. That's a good question. Is there such thing as boundaries? I don't know. I mean, I think when I'm teaching, I'm all in. It's a blend, and I'm very transparent. Like, listen, I'm cooking dinner, but I can help you. You might hear a kid in the background screaming with their brother. You might hear a dog barking, but hey, I can help you. And so I just have to let it blend together. And that's sort of the only way it all works. My husband knows when I'm teaching, and when on Monday nights I have 3-hour windows of class, somebody might walk down and ask me a question. Got to tell the students, hold on, somebody needs help. There's a fight upstairs, but you just have to blend. So I don't know that I am a good boundary setter, not in this environment, because what's a boundary? Don't call me at 4 o'clock. I mean, what's a reasonable boundary to set? I really don't even know what it is anymore, because I don't really have office hours per se because I always make myself available. Like I have set times that I'm online, but those times might not work for everybody. 90% of my students are working full time. So those office hours in the evening is when a lot of people are working. So I have to make myself available. So it doesn't last forever. You know, we're on 10-week increments and I think we're in week 5. So 6 weeks, 6 weeks from now, I'll take a nap. But right now, you know, they are my focus.
Mm-hmm. And we have about 4 minutes left. And one question I have is, we've touched a whole lot on different ways you've made the most out of particularly trying time and a very quick transition. What's top of mind for you? What are the challenges that still need to be addressed that we all should walk away thinking about, and even continuing the conversation to connect and advance?
I'll tell you something that is troubling for me is I don't see my students' faces. And so not knowing who is in my class or not connecting with them or seeing them live is, it feels like I don't really, it's a very unnatural feeling to be a teacher and not know that you're teaching, you know, and know that you're connecting. And so I think about when this pandemic is over and I'm walking down the hall and someone says, "Hey, Professor Pope, I was in your class." And I'm like, I don't know who you are. I've never seen your face before. And they probably are, it's during this period of time. And so that bothers me because I typically will remember a face. And so there's going to be a community of people that I've never met, and I just see their digital name. And I have to, I'm trying to figure out how to overcome that, which is why I did the FaceTime challenge. And so they have 2 more weeks to connect with me because I want to see them. And when I see them, I get energized from them. They get energized from me. And they say, "I've never had a professor ask me to FaceTime them before. That's sort of cool." And I'm like, well, I mean, don't you have FaceTime? What's the big deal? I mean, we're human too, but I want to talk to you. So that's something that I struggle with, is missing that community in an asynchronous environment, and trying my hardest to create that because I want to know who you are.
Mm-hmm. Kelly, thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tara. This has been fun. You know, it's not every day you get to share with people that you don't know all the ways you were bad before, but better now. so this has been fun to do, and I hope that I said something that connects with somebody. And I think Alex will put my email in the chat for me, and then you can always utilize my Course Hero page if you're looking for content, especially if you teach accounting. There's a lot of stuff up there.
Mm-hmm. We have one outstanding question from Mary, and we'll follow up offline on that one, Mary. Again, Dr. Kelly Pope's email address is in the chat box. She is one of our educators who has offered her time and office hours to the community at large, and she's got a lot of actionable techniques up her sleeve. So if you have a challenge, she might, if she doesn't have a solution, she might help you brainstorm one, or at least put it to the test. Again, everyone, we invite you to join our community, engage, interact, find these new connections, share resources with each other. This is how we're making it through. And thank you so much for joining us today. Take care, be well. Bye, everyone.
Bye.